How's everyone doing on this beautiful day? Yeah, thank you for being here. I'm super excited to have two doctors, actually. No.
Yeah, it's true. Real doctors, not physicians.
And even if it weren't true, we would still go along with it.
So, help me welcome Gerd Wuestemann. Is that close?
Close enough.
Close enough. The Executive Director of Scottsdale Arts and oversees Center for the Performing Arts and SMOCA, the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art. And right over here is Andrew Nelson, the Chief Curator from Western Spirit, Scottsdale's Museum of the West, one of our favorite places. We have a lot of fans here. So we tried really hard to put together a fabulous contemporary into Western exhibit for you today to enjoy as the backdrop to this wonderful talk we're going to have. So it's not very often we have outside speakers, so thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here.
Well, we can't say no to you, Susan, so it's a no-brainer.
I am hard to say no to. Thank you. I like that. I'll save stories about you for later, but this man is incredible. And I don't know Andrew as well, but I know he's incredible too. So I think we're going to have a lively conversation. I'm going to have you each of you give a brief background of, about you and how you landed right here in Scottsdale with all of us.
Okay, my life in a nutshell. This is a dangerous question, but first of all, thank you for being here and good afternoon. Thrilled to speak to you. If the name and accent didn't give it away, I did not grow up here in the Southwest. Germany is my country of birth. I grew up in a small town in a divided nation on the west side, just about 2 miles from the East German border. So a very interesting way of growing up. I'm a 100% working class. My family, for 650 years, every member of my family to this day has lived within 5 miles of my tiny hometown. And all working class people. We ran a toy store. I grew up in a house built in 1630, was baptized in the new church from the 1200s, replacing the old church from the 900s. And when I was 5 years old, I got a guitar in my hand and changed my life. If you look at these weird fake fingernails I'm using, I'm a classical guitarist by trade. I started young. I guess I had a gift. I worked really hard. My government supported me. Long story short, I did my first master's in Germany, my second, I did postgraduate in New York, second master's in the US, doctorate in the US. Toured and recorded for my whole life. But in my late 30s, I had a couple of bad accidents, and it shattered my left wrist and my right shoulder. While I can still play well, it was just enough to derail my performance career. So I had this, and I'm using a technical term, oh shit moment in my late 30s, where I was like, now what? Because I had degrees in guitar playing, and that was it. So I said, I have a bit of an entrepreneurial bone. I'd love to start a business. Seems like a crazy idea at the time, but wouldn't you know it, a few weeks later I met a proverbial rocket scientist that had invented a carbon fiber guitar and wanted to team up with me. And then I had a CEO from a carbon fiber manufacturer come on board to found a new company and pioneer this product. And I really learned in real time what is a balance sheet and why does it suck when you run out of cash and can't make payroll, with my nest egg on the line. So I share that with you because I've lived my entire life in the arts. I've skipped over the part, I worked as a professor at a building guitar program at a university in the South for a while. But so my whole life was in the arts, and then my life was all about building business, taking risk, but understanding the financial implications of that risk. And then eventually I was hired to take over a small nonprofit and build an art center from the ground up. And that eventually led me to my job here. So those pieces coming together, the sort of administrative management side, the sort of business management, financial acumen side, and my really lifelong deep passion for the arts, I think has shaped my perspective. And it's been thrilling to be here. I've been in this job for 8 years. We've grown from 3 departments to now 7. You mentioned 2 of those, and I'll tell you more about this in a second. But it's been an absolute joy. What an amazing place to be. I mean, just think about us. Here we are in early February, in semi-outdoors on a gorgeous day. Special place.
We are definitely living right here, for sure. So, and amazing guitar player. I've had the privilege of hearing twice, and we'll get you back out here some other time for that. But it's fabulous. So, Andrew, you have been here about 2 years now, right?
About a year and a half. Yeah.
Year and a half. Okay. So tell us about you.
Right. So my first love when it comes to the arts is movies. Love movies. I have 3 degrees in movies. Degree in watching movies. When I was 17, that's the moment people say to you, okay, well, you've got to decide what you want to do in college, as if that's going to dictate what you do the rest of your life. It's a big moment. And I like to do 2 things, play basketball and watch movies. And basketball didn't work out, so movies it was. 3 degrees in film, bachelor's, master's, and a PhD. So that's my training. When I was an undergraduate student, I began to watch a lot of Westerns. And I grew up in the science fiction and superhero-saturated popular culture of the 80s and 90s. Not a lot of Westerns on the silver screen during those periods. Did not have a father or a grandfather to introduce me to Westerns. So I was introduced to the Western genre academically as part of my study, my formal study. And I very quickly realized what many people realized, what many people had known for decades, that there was just something about the Western that brought out the best in our best performers and our best filmmakers. John Ford, Anthony Mann, Bud Bedecker, John Wayne, Gary Cooper. There was something about the Western, which is a comparatively limited palette, right? I mean, you're thinking about what you're telling a filmmaker or an artist. Okay, well, you can do whatever you want, but it's got to be set between 1865 and 1900. And it's got to be set west of Mississippi, but east of the Rockies. And here are the only 12 characters that you're allowed to use. That seems like a very limited palette, but the great thing about art, especially narrative art, is that restriction forces artists to be creative. This is one of the great paradoxes we know of art. Unlimited freedom does not always produce the best art. What I know best is film. And when many filmmakers were given the freedoms they had longed for, the work that they produced was just not as good. Because when you're working to a deadline, working in a certain budget, working under certain censorship restrictions, you have to be creative and find creative ways to communicate with your audience. So I just fell in love with the Western and spent the first part of my career, I suppose, in higher education. I was a professor at Montana State University, and then I was chair of the film department at the University of Utah. But over time, Western film broadened into Western culture, Western history, Western art. So I'm fortunate to talk about all of those things in a variety of contexts. And over that period too, I was increasingly asked to do things with museums, to give talks at museums, to program film series at museums, consult on museum shows, museums like the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts or the Denver Art Museum. That led to being a guest curator at a number of places, including the Briscoe Western Art Museum. And so then, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I got an inquiry from our friends here at the Western Spirit Museum in Scottsdale about whether I'd be interested in leaving the world of higher education. And it's a great world, right? Yeah, why would you leave? And making the trip 7 hours down the road to be the chief curator here. And we had vacationed in Arizona. Seemed like a good place to be. So that's what led me here.
Well, and we're very lucky to have you. And I have an affinity for Western Spirit Museum. My father was one of the founding members and devoted a lot of time to helping create something fabulous. And then I also was excited and thrilled that we got to, a small group of sculptors, got to have a private tour with Andrew and John Coleman last year. It was spectacular. So thank you for that, yeah. So, okay, so the whole experience of museums has changed, and we're going to talk a lot more about the movie stuff. But how do you go about creating a dynamic experience in both the museum and the Center for the Arts? And you should tell us a little bit more about Scottsdale Arts. And then museums are the #1 attraction, I think, for tourists wherever they go. We all want to go to the museums. How do you go about creating exciting, memorable experiences that will keep them coming back?
So I'll start by sharing a bit more about our organization, Scottsdale Arts, because we are kind of a seven-ring circus and a bit different. And two departments of our organization really deal with visual art, and more on that in a second. So there's the Center for Performing Arts, there's SMOCA, the Museum of Contemporary Art, there's Scottsdale Public Art, so all the public art across the city, and that is something that I'm particularly proud of and very happy about. Then we have Civic Center in Old Town, and all the events and festivals we're doing out there now. Then there's Scottsdale Arts Learning Innovation. We work extensively with the school system. We serve about 50,000 students with about 180,000 hours of arts education over the course of the year. And to me, that's a very personal passion. The arts in my youth changed my life, I believe, and there's an extraordinary level of power, especially for kids from low-income families that are at risk growing up. It's a really powerful team, so something very, very important for our team to execute. And then there is, of course, Canal Convergence, the big public art festival on the waterfront. Hopefully you've made it out there. It's a great gift to the community. We had 187,000 people over 10 days last year at Canal Convergence. A very, very remarkable thing. And then our newest partnership is with Cattle Track.
Yeah.
Anybody familiar with Cattle Track? So that partnership came out of, first, Janie Ellis was one of the greatest people I ever met. Her parents homesteaded Cattle Track. I was introduced to her in my first couple of months here. We became fast friends. She is the only person that uses profanity more than I do, which is saying a lot. And she's just a powerhouse lady. And then we bought a house across the street in Cattle Track in the neighborhood. And so we became friends first, neighbors second, and now partners. She has committed the entire property, 13 acres in the heart of Scottsdale, into a nonprofit trust to ensure that in perpetuity this will remain an arts and creative hub in Scottsdale. And Scottsdale Arts is now taking on managing and programming more and more, and everything we do is additive to all the great things that are already there. We just moved to a historic barn on that property. And started a career development program for young artists. That's something else I'm very passionate about, is teaching young artists to do what all the artists here figured out, how to make a career in the arts. Not just being a good artist, but making a living at it as well. So those are the 7 pieces that is Scottsdale Arts. We have an extensive contract with the city to do our work and to really be the city's cultural stewards, if you wish. We love working with our great colleagues down the street and everybody else here, and I think there is a great symbiotic relationships between all of us. When it comes to arts experiences, I believe that more is more, and things cross over. Not everybody may be a fan of our contemporary art like we exhibit in the museum, but sometimes their first experience with us is through the love sculpture in Civic Center. Or when you drive up the 101, you see those colorful lizards and cacti. That's a 6-mile-long public art piece. Or to quote one of my friends that lives in New Jersey, when I visit you, I'm always jealous because I drive the New Jersey Turnpike every morning and dodge potholes, and you drive this and get to look at that. Public art, 162 monumental pieces, is what gives us joy every day and makes part of the beauty that is Scottsdale. It is sort of the subversive entryway for people to experience the arts. You don't have to buy a ticket, you don't have to go anywhere, but you're somehow engaged by it. And that then translates into someone that might come to our museum. One thing that we're really passionate about is constantly something new to offer. We have 6 galleries. We do 13 or so different exhibits every year, all curated in-house. So there's always something new. And we do a lot of events on our campus that bring people that normally, they might come for a rock and roll show, but all of a sudden find themselves looking at a piece of art on the walls. That is the power of modern organizations that can bring all these different pieces together. And I know the Museum of the West does a lot of that these days as well. It's really sort of allowing people to access the arts through a variety of entryways and on different levels and different stratas.
And it wasn't too long ago that the Center for the Arts went under an incredible acoustical makeover.
Yeah, we worked really hard the last few years to make the main theater in the center one of the best listening rooms in the South. And of course, we currently celebrate 50 years of the Center for Performing Arts. We had a big gala performance November 1st last year to celebrate this 50th anniversary and to celebrate all the work we've done to really maintain it as one of the great listening rooms in the South.
Wonderful, thank you. And you are getting ready to open a brand new wing, but maybe we'll save that for later.
Sure.
I want to, if you have, how many of you have been to Western Spirit and the movie poster exhibit and the color exhibit? the way you do all the different exhibits is so fascinating. But what is obviously movies are your thing, but tell us.
Well, it's interesting because we're dealing with, different tents here. So contemporary art, it's a very big tent, right? So there's lots of ways that you can potentially engage with different folks. And we bring up the word Western or Western art, people immediately have something very defined in their mind. And that can work to your advantage or to your disadvantage. I think the conversation that we've had at Western Spirit Museum and the way that we're moving, and I think really a great opportunity, is recognizing that the Western as a genre has always been a multimedia genre. And the way people have experienced the Western has always been multimedia. So the example I give, and maybe we can do the interactive part here. The most famous Western artist ever is? Anyone? Who's the most famous Western artist ever? The painter, let's say. I heard Remington. Who said Remington? Yeah, Frederick Remington. Have you heard of Mr. Remington? Yeah, you probably have. Right, so Frederick Remington, probably the most famous Western artist to ever live. I don't think there's much question about that. I mean, Charlie Russell partisans, well, I am one, might object to some degree. But how did Remington become so popular? Is it because people went and saw Mr. Remington's work in galleries? No, of course not. It's because they encountered his work in the pages of Harper's or Collier's or something like that, always accompanying either reportage from the West or thrilling tales of things that had happened in the West. So the experience is always a multimedia one. There was a moment in time in this country when the Westerns suffused our popular culture in a way that you really needed to experience in order to appreciate it. And I think some of you are experienced enough to have experienced that, right? It was on television, movies, books, comic books, the radio, advertising, fashion. It was just everywhere. So it was really a multimedia experience. So that's artists working in so many different media, offering their interpretations of this interesting moment in American history, that very limited moment that I talked about before. So the opportunity we have at Western Spirit is to tell the story of the West through art, through its visual and material culture. So the perspective we have on history is the artist's perspective. How is it that artists at the time and since have made sense of this seminal moment in American history, the one that so many people think is what defines us as Americans? And that's the great opportunity. And that means that you welcome in distinct voices, distinct peoples. It's what enables me to do an exhibit that includes movie posters and Frederick Remington and bronzes and indigenous pots and jewelry and so on. All of that is a part of the Western genre, the art of the American West. So that's the exciting opportunity that we have at Western Spirit. In our collections, we have the foundation that enables us to do that. And the advantage of that is we can kind of meet people where they're at. Right? And I maybe we'll talk more about that, but I really believe in that principle of meeting people where they're at when it comes to museums. And we may be at a point where people don't remember Frederick Remington, but they probably still remember Clint Eastwood. And so they'll come for Clint Eastwood, and then I'll be able to take them different places and introduce them to Frederick Remington, or to Nampeo, or to Max Schweitzer, or to Kurt Walters, people they wouldn't normally meet. Just by welcoming them in the way that Western art has always welcomed so many different people, the way that, if we're being honest, the American West has always been an open, welcoming place.
I love how you have really populated the galleries with such variety, and you're right. You get people, they come for what they think they need, and you give them, or what they want, you give them what they need. I messed up.
And what they need is John Wayne.
Yes. So you have the poster collection. I loved specifically how you talked about the posters that would be in the US versus posters in other countries, and for the same movie, but completely different storyline.
So we're fortunate to be the steward of the Renard Strickland collection, a remarkable collection of Western movie posters and advertising, amassed by Mr. Strickland, who's a really interesting guy, Cherokee art lover, but lawyer by trade. Worked in American Indian law at a number of universities, including the University of Oklahoma, but he's just a movie nut. And so over the course of his life, amassed this really remarkable assemblage of materials, which he jointly donated to us in ASU, and that forms the foundation of a lot of our storytelling. And the great thing about the collection is it's not just American advertising, it's advertising from around the world. So we can take a single film and we can see how it was advertised to audiences both in the United States, but also in various European countries, Italy, Spain, France, but then also in Japan. Some posters are from African countries, some are from South America. It's really remarkable. And what it serves of is a reminder of how the Western traveled the world very well. Right? I mean, sometimes we have ideas about, let's say, the ideology that the Western purportedly promoted, right? Racism, sexism, colonialism, something like that. And it's important to have those conversations, but seeing those posters is a humbling reminder that the people who are supposedly suffering under those conditions, the conditions that the Western supposedly promoted, loved Westerns, saw themselves in the Western, saw themselves in a place that they knew they would never go to. And then there comes a point in time in history when they begin to make their own Westerns and tell their own stories. And you appreciate that they were seeing very different things in those same films. So it reminds us to always be, humble, I suppose, when it comes to making assumptions about the relationship between people and art. But it's just a reminder of just how impactful the Western was, not only here, but globally, that you could tell stories about a place that the vast majority of Americans, to say nothing of people out in the world, will never visit. And I find that endlessly fascinating.
Well, and the Lewis and Clark exhibition involved bringing along artists who recorded what was happening, and most of the population, when that was going on, 95% of the population was east of the Mississippi. So they really were telling this story of the West to people who could never have met, like your friend in New Jersey. A lot more space out here.
Well, actually, it's funny listening to you talk about this. So as I mentioned, I grew up in Germany, and in Germany, every kid my generation or older grows up with Karl May. A very famous German author that we all, he wrote tons of books about the American West. The unique piece here being that he never set foot in the New World. It was all made up in his head, in his mind. And I grew up being fascinated by the stories, aspiring to at some point go to the Wild West. We all thought that out here all looks like what actually turns out to be Nebraska, because he never understood the difference. And then the first time I traveled out here and saw Red Rock, it was a homecoming. This is probably the reason why Germans still love to come here in the summer, because we think experiencing 110 degrees is a great thing. Very, very odd.
We love that people come here in the summer.
But to your point, I think you're absolutely right. There is a great fascination with sort of the idea of openness and endless possibility that transports us to something else within us. And I think you're right, there are lots of interesting entryways to exploring and experiencing that through the art. And in some strange way, when we talk about contemporary art, we also are very focused on contemporary art is experiential, like any art should be, and it should give you a sense of place and a sense of self, and it allows you exploration. It's just that the medium or the sort of the key that unlocks that piece looks fundamentally different. And but it's the same thing. You give yourself to sort of what makes that piece intriguing, and if it works for you, that's great. If looking at Remington works for you, that's just as great. It's really just they're two sides of the same coin in essence.
I think it gives you room to breathe when some people will experience, openness with the abstract, and other people experience it, looking into something they can imagine being a part of and experiencing. So, go ahead.
I was just saying, and the great thing about the museum is it allows for all of those experiences to be contained within the same building. I mean, that's the remarkable opportunity that museums have, and I think that's why, to your point, aside from like tourist guilt, having too much fun in the sun, you need to educate yourself. Aside from that, I think that's what draws people to museums. I mean, they understand the range of experiences on offer are, reflective of kind of the breadth of humanistic expression. It's just it's really a privilege to work in museums for that reason.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question. And by the way, we did a nice feature on museums in one of our art connections, and another one we did was on travel destinations. And have you been to Kanab?
Little Hollywood? Yes, of course I've been.
Of course you have. Kanab, Utah is beautiful, very southern part of Utah. And I almost bought that, well, I came home and said, Jake, we should buy that hotel, that white. It was for sale, and it was this hotel where all of the movie stars in the Western John Ford era stayed, and every room's named after a movie star.
Yeah, no, folks been to Kanab? Kanab? Yeah.
One of the best friends animal sanctuary.
Yeah, great. I mean, amazing history up there. It's really this enterprising family, these brothers, the Perry brothers, who after the creation of the national parks realized, okay, well, they've got something here. And that worked pretty well, but then they also realized that this would be a great place for Hollywood to make their newfangled Western motion pictures. And that is what led to an influx, a steady influx that continues to this day to southern Utah for folks making Westerns.
The Perry Brothers Hotel, it was for sale. Took a picture of it, and I'm like, Jake, we should buy this. We could do an art show there in the other season, but we're still here, and somebody else bought it. But what you were saying earlier, before I brought up Kanab, I'd like to know from both of you, what part of your job or your role brings you the most joy?
So on the day-to-day, we have about 200 staff members, and I don't think anybody is crazy enough or stupid enough to go into this business unless you're really passionate about your job in the arts. And so working with our teams is a remarkable sense of joy. And for me, one of my firm beliefs is that everybody in the organization has to do with how your experience goes with us. So I try to value everybody and show them that, and as a result, everybody really shows up and is there to serve this cultural experience for our community. We're really here to serve the community first and foremost. I believe in a time when we see more and more bifurcated, and when we say things to each other over social media that we would probably never say to each other face to face. The arts are one of the last bastions of us realizing that we're more alike than different. Right? Even we can argue about the merits of a certain type of art or another, but even that sense tends to connect us more. So being partly responsible for having that, bringing that experience to a few 100,000 people over the course of a year is sort of the greatest source of joy for me every day. And then more concrete, I love walking into Smoka because I think, Andrew, you said contemporary art is a huge tent because there's such a vast array of everything from digitally based work to whatever else, and it's become more and more complex and widespread. When we curate shows at Smoker, we try to think how every gallery leads you into a sort of a different experience, but there's a thread that guides you through, that connective tissue that connects it all. So when I walk into our galleries, I love on the daily, I spend a little time in the galleries. I'm not responsible for curation, thank God. We have people that are experts in that. But I enjoy spending a little time and seeing how that impacts my sensibility for the day. And I really enjoy how it flows from, currently we have a light-based installation by a collective from the United Kingdom that is the ultimate sort of immersive experience piece of art. Then we have a set of works by an artist from Seattle. He works with feathers and mechanical moving elements, both on the macro and micro scale. So one of the pieces is filling an entire gallery, the others are tiny, and they all have little hand cranks so you as a visitor can touch them. It scares me every time I see it, but we carry extra insurance, I've been told. And then there's a set of works that is all earth-based. Somebody from the Olympic Peninsula basically brought an ecosystem and work based on that ecosystem used in the desert. And then we have a piece that is based on, it's extremely minimalist. It's based on silks stretched and exposed to, he mainly works on Fire Island in New York. So exposed to wind and sea and sand. And he then made work for us here at Cattle Track, where he buried these pieces for a few months to allow the desert impacting them. So we wanted to have something that we can juxtapose to, here's what happens to silk when he plants them on the seaside in the Northeast, and here's what happens when you dig them in desert soil first of all, he had a bit of an awakening because, shoveling sand that's soft and water soaked is one thing. Digging in the ground here is a whole different experience. But here's what happened. All of a sudden we found a piece that was sort of dug up and frayed. And so we put motion activated cameras up at night. And they showed that the coyotes were having field days with this. They were just playing. We have like hours of documentation of these coyotes. They took their cubs, they just played with the stuff. And a couple of these pieces turned out so beautiful that we actually mounted them and called them Cattle Track 1 and 2, because it was the ultimate expression of sort of, localized pieces, right? And it was just fascinating. So going from gallery to gallery, experiencing within just a few footsteps the extraordinary spectrum of work, all created by artists roughly of the same age, very much alive, gives you a whole an amazing appreciation for this spectrum, just like what you see in these tents here, right? The spectrum of expressivity that we can exercise today, and I think that's one of my greatest joys. And then because I'm a musician, we do amazing outdoor music festivals. We did the Streamy Draw Festival. It's a rock and roll thing with 20,000 screaming, 30-odd-year-olds running around, and it was an absolute joy to see how lovingly people come together. Same with Canuck Convergence, how incredibly diverse the crowds is, how much families come to enjoy those things together. It gives me a sense every day and fulfills me with the idea that what we're doing really does matter and really does help us build stronger, better communities.
Amen. I second that. How about you, Andrew?
Well, I suppose, selfishly, one thing I enjoy is the collaborative nature of taking, the ideas that I have up here that, as an academic, I would normally express simply with words, right, in a book or an article or something like that, and then bringing it to life in 3 dimensions, which requires the assistance of a team of talented people. So I really enjoy that collaborative dynamic, and that leads into something that Gerd spoke very eloquently about, is seeing, working collaboratively with a group of talented people to try to position art and artifacts in a space where people are going to see them differently than they might otherwise, and hopefully understand them in the way they might not otherwise. I mean, this is the great advantage of the museum, and it is what distinguishes a museum from a gallery. In a museum we have certain luxuries, we have a little more time, but we get to interpret the pieces, right? Because our goal is not to make a sale. There's not anything wrong with that. That's a great thing. But that isn't the end point of the museum, right? The museum is to position a piece of work, interpret it in a way that it will be meaningful to people, or in a way that it might not otherwise be. So that's a great responsibility. But when it works, it is incredibly rewarding. And I've seen countless times the way that simple decisions about lighting, about text, about the color of the gallery walls, about how you put 2 pieces together can lead to these remarkable moments of discovery, like even epiphanies. And you can see them in real time in the museum. They don't happen every day, but when they happen, they're very special. And so I find that just infinitely rewarding, especially because I feel privileged to share this work that's in this great narrative, artistic, and cultural tradition that has meant so much to so many people, and maybe doesn't have the same purchase in the popular imagination that it might have, but still, can achieve that meaning. And so we have the luxury of time and space in the museum to try to bring these things to life and help people to understand why they matter, why they were so meaningful, and why it still matters to this day. So if those moments occur, I'm happy.
And I also love the architecture of the Western Spirit Museum. It's fantastic. It's part of the whole experience.
Yeah, we're fortunate to be a LEED certified building. Studio Ma is the local architectural firm who built the building for us, very intentionally. So there are pieces of the architecture that are meant to evoke the landscape, and in fact meant to replicate some of its environmental efficiencies. There are portions of the building that are meant to replicate features of Western art traditions, like indigenous weaving, indigenous basket making, for example. So it really is a stunning building, and what you put in the museum always exists in relationship to the building that you're in, and sometimes you're working against the building, and sometimes you're working with the building, but I feel most of the time I'm working with the building, and that it lends itself to the type of storytelling we're trying to achieve.
So speaking of building, we were excited to be there in October, I guess, for the casino night, which was held in the brand new wing before it had any art in it. But you have this amazing expansion that is complete and getting ready to launch. Are you excited about what you're curating to put in that for the first exhibit?
Yeah, very exciting. So we're looking at a 12,000 foot expansion of the museum, made possible through the generosity of Louis Buzz Sands IV, who some of you may recognize from his many car dealerships, who's also just been a great patron of a number of causes, the Boy Scouts, but certainly the arts, has an impressive art collection. So we're fortunate to be expanding. We've got 4 new galleries, and it's sort of like T-minus 6 weeks. So I'm probably going to go back to the museum after this.
No pressure.
Keep curating. Yeah, it's going to be great. We've got a new gallery dedicated to the Basha collection, which a large portion of which was donated to our museum a couple of years ago, and then we are also going to feature new galleries exhibiting our collections of Native American jewelry, Hopi pottery and ceramics, and Western bronzes. So it's a great mix, showing that diversity of media that I talked about earlier. I'm excited for folks to see it. It takes all the things that we're doing very well and just gives us more opportunity to tell more stories.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. And you also, part of your curating is determining what color the walls should be and graphics. And it's not just put art up.
No, it isn't. And again, that sort of gets back to some of the things I talked about before, that you can, deliberate decisions about colors, about graphics, this is a basic one, for example. So you're doing a show about a particular artist. Do you put photographs of that artist in the gallery? Maybe yes, maybe no. It depends. Depends on the story you want to do. So you have a lot of things that are available to you. Although the thing that my colleagues at the museum are giving me a hard time about is I'm basically painting every gallery black. I'm like the Rolling Stones. I'm just gonna paint it black. So there'll be a lot of black in the new wing.
Okay, we'll have to check that out. And good lighting, excellent lighting, of course.
The best.
Yeah. How much of your collection is donated, and do you also have a budget to curate what you wish to have that's not donated?
Oh, I appreciate that question. So, Western Spirit Museum is distinct from a lot of other museums in that when we were founded, we didn't have a permanent collection. The way museums tend to be founded is you have a benefactor with a large collection of art who wants to share that art with the world, and that collection becomes the foundation. This has been the story, not since time immemorial, but certainly in the modern age, and Gerd, you'll be well aware of that history. So that wasn't Western Spirit. The idea was we would host traveling exhibitions, we would curate from private collections, but we would never have a permanent collection of our own. But very quickly, people with collections saw that we were doing a very good job, and so began to offer us collections of things. And so very quickly we became a collecting institution. So most of what you see in the museum now is from our permanent collections. We still, rely strategically on loans from particular private collectors, but we really now have one of the most diverse, really significant collections of Western American artifacts and American Indian artifacts in the nation, and that creates unlimited opportunities for exhibitions and storytelling in the future.
I love the saddles and bridles and bits and spurs.
We got a lot of leather in the museum.
Yeah. And was that mostly Abe Hayes?
Yes, the famed Arizona galleryist, who also, just over the course of his life, amassed a huge assemblage of just everything to do with cowboy and ranching life, but also artifacts related to popular culture. Our Spirit of the West collection, yes, which is on exhibit and is one of the original exhibits to the museum.
Lots of fun. So Gerd, did I read too that you have a new theater opening?
So we are going to groundbreaking probably in May or June for a transformation. There's a small space inside the center that We call it Stage 2. It used to be called the Cinema Studio, I think. It is original 1970s and not the good kind of 1970s. So it's carpeted walls and it has not aged gracefully. And we're finally ready. We have some bond money from the Geo Bond 2019 and we raised a lot of money ourselves to really transform this into a beautiful little modern jewel box theater that will be great for more intimate shows, for more community-based work and lots of other things. We are also working on a couple of other opportunities right now, since we've been very fortunate over the last 3 years to attract some very large gifts for future capital projects for infrastructure. We're looking at a museum's expansion and a couple of other things, and in our little campus world. Of course, roughly 3 years ago, we opened the new Civic Center. Last year was the last season, our second full season. We did about 87 events and 165,000 people on that Civic Center. And one of the challenges in designing Civic Center was we have these beautiful, 3 beautiful historic buildings that were really designed and built by the great Benny Gonzalez as a unit. The City Hall, the Civic Center Library, and the Center for Performing Arts. And those buildings are all designed in this, I call it sort of Southwest brutalism, right? It's kind of like Adobe meets, blocky mid-century, and they all kind of speak to each other. But the language is very heavy. And we wanted to build something new with these outdoor stages that complemented and lightened that entire infrastructure bit and tied it together. And I think really the architects who work with like Flat out of San Antonio, they did a wonderful job doing just that. So now we have this lovely 35-acre campus that brings everything together. The museum is a wonderful space. I'm very fond of the building. It started its life as a dollar cinema, some of you may recall,
I've been here.
and was rebuilt really in a very, let's say, cost-effective manner. There's some ingenious things in our museum. It's Smoka. They're open rafters, which allows us to hang and tether stuff just about everywhere. It's like a giant erector set. And we take full advantage of it, our install team. And Andrew, you talked a bit about the extraordinary effort that goes into installing a great show. Curators are important, and preparators and exhibit specialists are important too, because they think about, how do I want this wall to read? How do we design something that complements or juxtaposes? How do I get to the narrative? We use a lot of temporary walls in our museum that are constantly making the galleries appear differently. And because of that erector set nature of the ceiling, we can hang them everywhere. Lighting has a stunning impact on how shows read in the museum. We're about to do a full lighting revamp of the whole museum next summer, and we tested in one of the galleries the new lighting system we want to use. And between that lighting, how it reads, versus our old system, it is night and day. It's really remarkable. So all those pieces come together and impact not only the curatorial decisions, but also how you experience what you see. And so I'm excited about the expansions, but I also want to pick up a bit on what Andrew's suggested. That is this idea that in the arts we live in an ecosystem. This tent and what you've built and all the artists that contribute here are part of that ecosystem. And museums are part of the same ecosystem as well. We all serve different parts of this piece, right? And I think the idea that in a museum you can tell a story and you set it up it evolves over time. You can guide people to experience things really from a narrative. There's this idea of stewardship and scholarship, which we often forget when we talk about museums. Right now there's a lot of pressure on museums because we shouldn't spend so much on it, or maybe they're too cumbersome, and sometimes they become unwieldy in today's world of shortened attention spans. But that's why I think they are particularly important, because this idea of caring for pieces that are important to us, that define our heritage and identity, that's a real, I think that's a real privilege for us and a real burden to us as well, right? Smoka did start as a collecting institution. Like many young museums, the Smoka is 26 years old. It started with a bit of a mixed bag. People offer you a lot of things. Maybe you shouldn't have taken everything, but once you have it, it's hard to get rid of it. And then over time, we've really refocused and sharpened our perspective. And yet, even though there is a significant collection, Smoker never permanently, we always showcase in one of our galleries the collection, so you can always see parts of what we own. But because we deal with living artists and living art, we're naturally focused on always having new people that come to us. It's typically the artist, him or herself, who comes and brings their work and installs and works with us. We do work with, through our collections management, with loans from significant museums from around the world. That is part of it. But I think when all those pieces come together, it creates a tapestry that plays a role in this fabric of the arts, just like the opportunity to buy things here, or the opportunity of bringing arts education to our schools so that we instill that same sense of caring for great artwork into the next generation.
That's great. And I really, the ecosystem is so important, and I think each museum or art space that we go into has its own personality and its energy that you can feel. And I think you do a really good job delivering that, and people can really become part of the experience when they're there, and that's what makes them want to come back. Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I'm most excited about since I've been here is from our campus, if you walk down 2nd Street, it's 2 blocks, and you get to our friends at Western Spirit, and across the street, the Artist School, one of Scottsdale's best kept secrets, right? It's an amazing, amazing thing. And then you walk up Marshall Way, and it's another block, you're in the Gallery District. And then another block, you get to the waterfront where we have all these festivals, including our converters, right? So if you think about this, within like roughly a mile of walking distance, you have all these this cultural infrastructure that is available easily to everybody here. Most of our museums, we have a lot of free days, or admissions isn't very expensive. So there's so much opportunity for everybody to really be immersed and involved. And I'm 100% with you. The most wonderful thing is that what we offer is very different than what Western Spirit offers, as it should be. So all these pieces live side by side and come together, and I think that's just amazing.
Absolutely.
I think I completely agree with that. And one thing that I would add, and I think this is important to emphasize, is how every effort that Gerd just enumerated can rightfully be called a grassroots effort. Right? This is the local community. There's a long tradition of the arts in Scottsdale. This is in many cases the community deciding that these are things that we value, and we're going to make them happen. This isn't the case of, what we call them, missionaries from the big city coming and telling us, oh, well, here's what you need, right? You need to have this particular type of arts experience, and because I'm not from here, I can come and bring it to you. I've spent all my life in the West, so I've lived in Bozeman, Montana, lived in Salt Lake City, so I've dealt with a lot of those well-intentioned individuals. But what really does make Scottsdale special is that there is so much happening, but it really does come from the community, that it is community-driven. That really is special, something to really treasure. But also something that needs to be preserved, and that doesn't continue without folks like you coming to talks like this. So,
well, and the leadership. I mean, I've been here since 1982, which I don't know how that math works when I'm only 40, but 1982, I lived at Miller and Osborne, and it was completely different. I remember the wooden bleachers at the stadium, and I used to work at a restaurant at 2nd Street called Pishke's Paradise. Anybody remember? Yeah. That's where the sign's from. So I would ride my bike to work, and on the way home I'd stop, because I worked breakfast and lunch, I'd stop and catch the end of a baseball game. And before that was there, and the Scottsdale Artist School was over in the Safeway Plaza on Camelback, which is now part of the waterfront area. So it's been really exciting to see all this, change and growth and passion, and even looking back to how many of you came from somewhere else and you would drive up and down Hayden and go, wow, it's so clean and beautiful and green, and there's no billboards. And that whole green belt was one of our early city council members' brainchild, because he said, we don't want to have a big concrete, thing right down the middle. So we designed a green belt that was meant to be, carry the floodwater when it came in. So just thank goodness we had so many great leaders.
you know, Andrew, I mean, obviously I really feel fortunate because Andrew and Todd down the street are great colleagues and have done wonders for this museum and for the scene here. And I really feel lucky that I've landed here. And it was very much deliberate because, just like you described, I love cities where the arts sort of live in its DNA a bit, right? Where it's not something that's sort of just helicoptered in. I mean, I grew up in a city that became a city in 976. We are celebrating 75 years of Scottsdale this year, to give a perspective. And yet, the public art program started with the Louise Nevelson sculpture we bought for $33,000 in 1973, when the city was 21 years old. And the city was then certainly the westernmost town, and yet a group of rabid contemporary art lovers commissioned a piece from one of the, at the time, leading abstract sculptors in New York, and a woman at that. So think about what statement that makes for the place we live in. That's a real powerful thing. And I think to this day, this idea of, if you commit yourself to this community, if you're not trying to be the out-of-towner that knows it all, but if you really try to serve this community and connect to the people here, I think we are only scratching the surface right now. I am so unbridled in my optimism of how much more we can do with art and culture here. Really, this is becoming more and more of a creative hub. And we play a little role, hopefully, in this. And all of you here in this tent, and all of you as audiences and artists and art buyers and lovers have all are part of that. Here you can make huge shifts, while in, say, some of the big places like New York or Chicago, you may be making incremental inroads. And I think this is one of the most intriguing things about working here.
I'm going to ask at the end, I'm going to ask you a question at the end, but before, I like to open it up and see if there's questions from anybody in the audience or online. Hi to all of our online friends. Okay. Dave.
You've been referring to the Spirit of the West Museum. Am I not thinking correctly that it says the Scottsdale Museum
a Western Spirit Scottsdale's Museum of the West.
But isn't the sign over the front entrance the Scottsdale Museum?
Yeah, don't get me started on that.
It's kind of a long name.
You know, there's a bigger conversation here about, you know, we've talked about the many great things about Scottsdale, many great things. Public signage is not one of them.
I agree.
So we are Western Spirit Scottsdale's Museum of the West, yeah. Or, you know, we're the only Western museum in town, so, you know, ask for the Western Museum. And,
you know, that's a great question, but I'll have to tell you, I think we're much worse off because Scottsdale Arts is like the Procter & Gamble of arts organizations. You know our products, you know Arm & Hammer and Colgate, but you don't really know Scottsdale Arts.
Oh, that's great. Well, yes, Nancy, do you want to?
Years and years ago, there used to be an arts and crafts fair in the town, you know, and then we had COVID, and then we had other things. Any chance of our ever having that back again?
Thank you, that's a great question. I get that question all the time. So you're absolutely right. For the 50th anniversary edition of the Scottsdale Arts Festival at Civic Center, before the bridge was repaired and we did the renovation and all that stuff, it was March 13, 2020. We were getting ready to open the next day, the 50th anniversary of it, and then I had to talk to 200 artisans to shut it down because of COVID. It was a heartbreaking moment, honestly. Yes, we had aspirations to bring it back. Then the interruption with the bridge repair and then the new Civic Center was a big piece. And then by the time we were ready to reopen, we evaluated, and other arts fairs had grown up around the valley. And we were approached by Mercantile Market, whom we built a partnership with, to do artisans fairs 3 times a year really at Civic Center. That's where we are right now. That's why it hasn't come back. But, and this is a big but, I'm working, hopefully for next year, certainly the year after that, on a reimagined arts festival that highlights the great work of artists and from around the area, and also leans a bit into sort of overall lifestyle entertainment things, so we can draw a new, different audience and really rebuild this. If I can get anything done before I retire in 10 years, I want to have a 50th anniversary of that event. So thank you.
Yeah, that was very sad. That's good to hear that you're working on something new.
I also closed on my house that day, so it was a really crazy day, I have to tell you.
Glad you had somewhere to stay by yourself. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. I am a big advocate of museum memberships. It's like, just buy the membership, and a lot of the museums have reciprocal memberships, but last June when we were in New York City, it was a grand reopening of the Frick Museum, and we either could wait in line forever and hope we could get in, or buy tickets in advance, which we hadn't done. Like, can we buy a membership? And then you get right in, and you support the museum, and I get, newsletters. So how can we best support each of your organizations?
We have a one membership that is for the entire Scottsdale Arts, for the entire umbrella, for everything we do. It gets you discounts for tickets to the shows, it gives you other perks, it gets you free entrance to the museum, it gets you special access to special events, and it is a reciprocal, North American Museums Alliance reciprocal ticket as well. So fairly easy, and it gets you connected to us. You get to hear from us more and get some insights, and you support a great cause. Yeah, we love membership. It's a lifeblood piece.
Yeah, I make the same sales pitch. westernspirit.org, membership pays for itself in a couple of visits. And like every museum, we just have so much going on, and membership gets you all of it for free. I mean, we show over 50 movies a year in our beautiful, newly renovated cinema. We have an educational program available to members and the public almost every week. So membership has its benefits, so I can't advise you strongly enough. And like our friends at SMOCA, Western Spirit is constantly changing. There is something new every 4 months, every 6 months. So the museum isn't static. So these are places you want to visit more than once a year, and you have multiple reasons to do so. So we hope you all come down and visit us. And
certain levels of membership, you get guest passes and share them with visitors. So tell us a little bit more about your movie. Don't you usually do a little bit of narrative about the movie that's showing? Oh, yeah. So as I said, we have started doing at least one movie a week, and it's not just a film screening. So it's not just an opportunity to see great classic and contemporary Western movies on the big screen. We always have an introduction. Sometimes it's me. Sometimes it's some of my colleagues at ASU. Sometimes it's a local film critic or another film historian. Sometimes it's a filmmaker will come and introduce, and then we always have a discussion afterwards as well. So we're trying to embrace that Cinematheque model of film engagement. And you're going to feature Cowgirls by Mark Sternberg coming up, maybe? That's one of the screenings coming up. So I should point out we've got not only fiction films, documentary films. It runs the entire gamut because film is just a vital art form, and we treat it that way. Very good, very good. Okay, any other questions? Nobody? Well, I am just thrilled that both of you were able to join us and to share a little bit of insights and help people understand the magic of museums. And I do hope that everybody will get down and see each of these places. And I thank you, Gerd, so much, and Andrew, thank you for being here. Thanks for having us. Thank you.